Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about the SAG-AFTRA strike in context to dungeon mastering Dungeons and Dragons, and how the SAG-AFTRA strike is astoundingly complex, and why it has mammoth ramifications for every dungeon master, and why we have to be planning for what's happening right now, and how it's absolutely critical every dungeon master fully understands what's happening with the SAG-AFTRA strike. So let's jump into this. So I'm telling you, you have no idea. Like, the SAG-AFTRA strike is huge for every dungeon master, and the reason why is SAG-AFTRA has that. When SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Actors. Can you imagine? Boy, man, they have not updated these, these acronyms. Wow. Like, can you imagine that radio actors are involved in this, and that all of this is directly impacting every single actual play that matters, which is all Dungeons and Dragons? There's so many things we learned from the SAG-AFTRA strike. One of the things is, as soon as SAG-AFTRA strike went on, it caused the Hollywood shutdown. Right, and the writer's strike didn't. I think that's really important to understand. Writer's strike didn't move the needle in any way, right? SAG-AFTRA strike shut Hollywood down in 24 hours. That is astounding, right? And then as soon as the SAG-AFTRA strike hit, everybody was like, "Hey, what's going on with our actual plays?" Right? And what we found was, like, almost everybody involved in every. So here's what we learned: every actual play, right, matters if it has Dungeons and Dragons, and if it doesn't have Dungeons and Dragons, it doesn't matter, right? Like, the only people that people are like, what's going on with Critical Role? What's going on with Dimension 20? What's going on with Adventure Time, right? And all of them run Dungeons and Dragons. They don't run a thing else, right? They're like, oh yeah, no, we don't care about anything else other than that, right? Right? Like one of the, like, nobody cared about what was happening with, I can't even name actual plays from any game that isn't straight running Dungeons and Dragons. That we learned that, right? Like, actual plays do not matter if you are not running Dungeons and Dragons. There's no famous Pathfinder, actual play. There's no famous Call of Cthulhu actual play. Like, none of them are. And then the other thing we found out was every single actual play that matters that is running Dungeons if you're not running Dungeons and Dragons, it doesn't matter. What we found was, get this, they're packed. All of them are packed with SAG actors and actresses. SAG actors. We don't really gender that anymore. Actor is referring to any actor or actress, right? I think actress is kind of an antiquated term, so I'm just going to say actor, right? So, every single actual play that people were cared about and checked on, they're all crammed full of SAG actors, right? So, like, the SAG strike is massively impacting Dungeons and Dragons, right? Truly. And this is astounding. We've really never seen anything like this, right? So, so the other thing that we learned is, basically, we're entering this narrative midnight. Stories are dying, right? Like, Hollywood's like, we're not going to give you any more stories. And what we found is there are no other sources for stories. Nobody reads anymore, so books don't count. And video games have never delivered story. They've always delivered activity, right? Because they will sacrifice narrative the moment they need activity, which is always. So really, Hollywood was the only people creating stories other than Dungeon Masters. So now Dungeon Masters have gone up massively in importance because we're the only people in position to actually tell Americans stories, real fresh stories. Every single other thing available right now is rotten fruit, right? Just crusty old stories that everybody's already heard, right? Like, there's no... And people need fresh food to live, right? They need fresh narrative to live. It is essential, right? So Dungeon Masters immediately became the only storytellers in the world who were free to tell stories, right? Authors don't matter. Nobody reads their junk, right? Video games never delivered narrative. Hollywood is refusing to deliver narrative. And now Dungeon Masters are the only storytellers left in the world, right? There you go, right? Now, what's really interesting is, as I have struggled, right? I've been struggling to make sure that I can understand the SAG-AFTRA strike and actually the Hollywood shutdown. That's the best way to say it. Is they are going against the studio executives, right? And what's interesting is the studio executives have been like kind of pulling the curtain back and saying, you guys don't understand what's happening, right? They're saying, you think we're making millions of dollars off of Hollywood, right? And you guys don't like us because we're studio executives and we're making millions off of Hollywood's work. And what people don't understand is that's not correct. These studio executives, they'd make millions anywhere, right? They could go to big pharma, they could go to big energy, they could go to big insurance, and they could make the same millions. They don't need Hollywood, right? These people are millionaires because they have incredible skill sets that are valuable in any industry, not just Hollywood. So they're not making millions because they're in Hollywood. They're making millions because they'd be making millions regardless of where they were, right? And that's not the case with actors, right? Like, maybe that is the case with actors. I'm sorry. Actually, I guess actors, because they're so charismatic, so confident, let's not add intelligent there. Not all of them are. All of them are charismatic and confident. Some of them are intelligent, right? And actually, to be clear, studio executives, all are intelligent. Not all are charismatic and not all are confident, right? So there's a gap there, right? So what's really fascinating is when you get to the part where you go, okay, what's happening here, right? And you realize what's truly astounding is when you realize, okay, this strike is going on, and what the studio executives are saying is, they're saying, hey, these actors are like, you better give us a piece. We want more money. And what they're saying is, you don't realize this. We're both fighting about this house we're living in, right? And right now, we're saying you actors live in the basement, right? And you actors are saying, no, we want the bedroom suite at the top, right? And what the studio executives are now saying is, what you don't realize is this house is on fire, right? Like, you're fighting with us over this house, and we're trying to put this house out. This house is on fire, and we are trying to put out the fire. What you don't realize, like, I'll explain this with one show, right? I've been watching Secret Invasion. That show cost $212 million. It is the cheapest looking piece of junk you will ever watch, right? It looks like they marginally mention Skrulls. You do not see a single superhero in the entire show, right? It looks like a cheap piece of junk, right? It cost $200 million, right? And what these studios executives are saying is, you're fighting with us over where to live in the house, and what we're telling you is the house is on fire, right? We taught people not to go to movies at the movie screen. We are destroying right now an industry that lived for 100 years and was profitable for 100 years. And we are all now following Netflix, which has burnt billions of dollars to make marginal profits. And the rest of us are still burning billions of dollars and not making any profit. Disney Plus is the closest next to Netflix and had a $500 million loss in one quarter, right? So truly, I cannot stress this enough. You are the last storyteller on the planet who can actually tell stories. Authors can't tell stories because nobody's going to pick up their crusty legacy products, right? Video games have never been able to tell stories. And right now, Hollywood is saying we refuse to tell stories. We are the last storytellers on Earth. We're the only ones who can supply fresh fruit. And without fresh fruit, people die. Like, you can't eat rotten fruit. You can't do it, right? So we're the last people to be able to tell a fresh narrative. You are more important than you have ever been. Get to the table and make sure you understand what you are doing is fundamentally important and fully irreplaceable. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.